Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Trevor. I'm the Communications Manager for the Canadian Cancer Survivor Network. Thank you, everyone, for attending today's webinar, which continues our 2024 series. In fact, I do believe this is the start of our spring 2024 series. If you are new to our webinar, a little background on our group. CCSN works to connect patients, survivors, and other stakeholder groups with decision makers in the wider community to engage in discussion and to act on evidence-based best practices to alleviate the medical, emotional, financial, and social costs of cancer. To learn more, visit survivornet.ca. Now, this webinar is being recorded, and a recording will be sent to you at the end of this rotation. And if you do want to send in some questions, don't hesitate to submit those into the chat function right here on the side of Zoom. Here we go. So Dr. Rob Rutledge is a radiation oncologist in Halifax, Nova Scotia. He specializes in breast, prostate, and a number of other cancers, and is associate of medicine in Dalhousie University. His passion is empowering people affected by cancer and has delivered hundreds of public talks and webinars, along with over 60 retreats and day-long seminars to thousands of cancer survivors. Rob has received the Cancer Care Nova Scotia Award for his excellence in patient care, and Doctors Nova Scotia presented him with a Health Promotion Award in recognition of his contribution to physician health and health promotion to cancer patients. He also runs CancerPEP.org. You can visit that website to learn more. He is joined by Dr. Gabriela Ilya, and is the Endowed Chair in Cancer Quality of Research Life Research, and Associate Professor in the Faculty of Medicine at Dalhousie University. Having taught 86 courses over 25,000 students at the University of Toronto, she is an expert in the psychology of emotions. She is the lead of the research lab pioneering patient-empowered programs, a comprehensive home-based 6-month daily health promotion program. And so without further ado, I would like to hand it over to both of them for the webinar, The Science of Emotions, How to Improve Your Health and Relationships Through Emotional Intelligence.
Thanks, Trevor.
Thank you, Trevor. What a wonderful introduction.
Yeah.
My goodness.
Do you want to just mute all? It might be the easier way to go now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
We'll be patient. Yeah.
Well, we're so excited about today's topic because we really think it's at the heart of health and healing, of good quality of life, and a condition that really allows us to bring our spirits into the world, to do the work, and live our passion, live our purpose, and live it well. So without further ado.
Well said. Yeah. We're on the same page and big picture there, right? So yeah, welcome everybody from across the country, whether you're watching this live or watching it afterwards. We're always excited to connect. I mean, the fact that you've shown up and you're interested in this topic, to me, it says it's sending a powerful message to yourself, and our minds are connected with our bodies. If we can learn how to work with our emotions and be more productive, as Gabriela says, use them for our own good, then you can actually have a better life, a better outcome. And so we're excited.
Yeah, and it's a lifelong process. I mean, it's because we live in a society where, for the most part, emotions have been, kind of put in the corner.
Yeah.
It's great to have intellect, to have a rational mind, to be pragmatic. But when it comes to emotions, we don't give them as much credit and emphasis in the role that they play for a good quality of life as we do, say, to the rational mind.
Yeah.
Right? So and they've been cornered somehow.
Well, yeah, I think about my own life. My dad was pretty harsh and demanding. I had to kind of repress my emotions. And I came up with this kind of early cognition that emotions aren't important, so that we shouldn't be emotional. And so I didn't understand that our emotions are actually a really key part of, for instance, decision-making. And ultimately, they have a profound influence on our life. And I wanted to share a story. So last night we went out to dinner, and I parked along a street, and there was a huge driveway, must have been 30 yards long, and I overlapped by 4 foot onto the driveway. And after the dinner, Gabrielle and I went back, and our car was gone, and there was markings that had been towed away. And so because we have a car that we could see the location, we found out it was in a towing lot. We called them, found out the police had actually taken our car away, had actually possessed the car, and you have to go through a whole rigmarole of proving it's your car and getting it back and so on. And so initially my emotion was of disappointment and kind of frustration. And it was late at night, I'm a little bit burnt out. And I also recognized, part of the story is recognizing that I'm vulnerable right now. So I'm tired, I'm irritable, I'm vulnerable to my emotions kind of flaring. And, part of that idea then is, do I want to let that incident define how I interact with people? Do I want to let all those frustrations and anger come out? And so I think I was able to settle down reasonably quickly and take a more kind of pragmatic approach. Like, there's nothing else I can do about this. Let's just go through the steps. Let's make the best of the circumstance. Because the alternative is to think, oh, those police are out to get us, and this is totally unfair, and just to be, righteous and, mad, and like society's going to hell, and, having all these kind of thoughts and getting kind of caught up. But, that's what happens. We get kind of emotionally hijacked. We get emotionally upset and angry. And we can only think in that means. And to have the emotional intelligence is to say, okay, I'm upset and angry. It's time to actually settle myself down so that I can have a more positive relationship with my wife, and to make good decisions, get a better night's sleep. And, so there are really pragmatic ways that understanding this talk can actually help your life, and to recognize, it happens to all of us.
I absolutely love your example, and I'll tell you why. Because in a way, it summarizes the direction of this talk. Because in this talk, we will talk about basic emotions that we perceive, that we experience, and their role in helping us navigate our way through life. However, having emotional intelligence also takes you from being the driver into observing yourself driving. So all of a sudden now you are not the puppet anymore, the puppet that drives the car, but the puppeteer who's moving the driver, who's moving the puppet. And that you talked about your decision-making mind, your decision emotional maker, if I may, where you have to now make a choice. What is it going to be, Robert? Are you going to choose peace and settle yourself down and allow your rational mind to look at this, right, in a manner that benefits you most? Or are you going to get really angry? Is it worth it? Is this a battle you want to pick? Is it really worth going to battle? And who are you going to battle with anyways, right? Because you're really only attacking yourself.
Good point.
But you'll be making better decisions if you're in a peaceful set of mind, if your body's at peace, if you feel good in your gut, right? And so that's what we want to talk about today. We want to talk about basic emotions. We want to talk about decision-making, the importance of emotions in helping us navigate our lives, and also remind ourselves that we do have a decision-making mind. And that mind can choose, what is it going to be? Is it going to be peace, or is it going to be a departure from peace? And how does that happen? So welcome.
It's so well stated, right? We have a choice. I think that's the point. So I'm not minimizing that, we can be running into difficult circumstances, and there are a lot worse things than getting your car towed away. So I want to minimize that for folks who are there. So bottom line, science shows emotions actually provide us with extremely valuable information and help us make decisions. This is really interesting. I'll go through the science of that later on. The starting point for all of us is mindfulness, to be able to pay attention right now. For instance, you're listening to this presentation. I want you to pay attention to your emotional energy right now. And when you can do that, that's the starting point. Without that, then you can't regulate, and you can't have this opportunity to be at greater peace. Next thing is that there's a whole skill set, which is the great thing, is you can actually improve your emotional intelligence. It's really hard to increase your IQ, your cognitive reasoning ability and memory and all that stuff, but you can actually change your perceptions and how you deal with those difficult circumstances.
Yes, and that process has a say in how we perform in cognitive tasks. And like I said, our decisions, cognitive tasks that have to do with creativity, whether we're creative or really closed up to creative thinking, decision-making, rapid decision-making.
All the above. It really influences how you work. And we'll also pitch that your healthy lifestyles actually influences what circuitry you're actually using within your brain, as Gabriella says, right? And so we can use, ultimately, using your emotions for good. Like I'm always thinking, is there a grander purpose here? It's not just about being happy in this moment. That's not necessarily the ultimate goal. It's like, how can I serve the values and virtues of my life right? And sometimes these are difficult things happen. We have to choose difficult decisions, but it's conscious and it goes towards our values, values-driven.
Yes. And the pertinence of this topic to say health and healing, whether you have a cancer diagnosis, whether you're fighting chronic disease, or whether you simply have a normal life and you want to do better, is that understanding the role that emotions have in health and healing, and how health and healing can't manifest and continuously if we are in an emotionally distraught state
Right.
on a permanent basis.
Yes.
So the question is, how do we settle that down? How do we get, in a way, ourselves out of the way? It's like time restricting eating. How do we give our body a break? But in this case, an emotional break.
Yeah, nice.
One where our mind doesn't constantly ruminate, one when our emotions are not constantly consuming, because the issue here, as you will see shortly, is that wherever our attention goes, our energy goes. And so if I'm constantly consumed by emotions and emotional states that are conflicting, that they don't line up, they don't bring me peace in my gut, it's very hard for the body to have energy for health.
Yeah.
And healing.
Yeah, the stress response is there as well. So what are we going to talk about? So we're going to try to overview this, define emotional intelligence, some few ideas as to how to develop that. And then we're going to actually look at different difficult emotions that people who've had a cancer diagnosis may be working with. So I'll just put this in the bigger context, which is really what Gabriella is saying, is you can facilitate healing. So the emotional healing facilitates healing in different ways, and it's actually necessary. So we may aim for cure or longevity after cancer diagnosis, which, you know, this is how you negotiate the medical system also requires emotional intelligence, right? So we're talking about those two. Obviously, people want to feel better. This is key to this. We can think more clearly and function better, again, if we're more settled, if we're working out of our frontal lobe. I would suggest that one of the main values within life is to connect more deeply within our relationships. But I can always reframe to say, I'm learning, I'm growing, I'm getting stronger. I can see a spiritual perspective. And so that might be a goal of yours as well as after a cancer diagnosis. And we also put within the context of what I call complete cancer care. So the best of the medical system with what you can do to empower yourself, body, mind, and spirit. So obviously it's the information, which you're kind of getting right now, advocating, getting the best care from the medical system, physically empowering your body as best you can, because that actually influences brain function and everything else. And then we're probably at this level on this talk is around healing at the level of the mind. However, it's one holographic picture, because really I think there's a spiritual perspective there as well that we're kind of pointing to, is to recognize we humans do suffer sometimes, and it's better to kind of be in a more clear state.
I love that you didn't shy away from saying that there is a spiritual perspective to this, because there is. Ultimately, what we all want is to have a state of peace right within, and that's not an easy goal to achieve, right? To feel peaceful at all times.
Or to feel peaceful more often.
Yeah, and that doesn't mean that when you're in a peaceful state, you may not choose, say, a course of action that it's conflicting.
It's difficult,
You might have to go into a very difficult court case, or talking to a physician that is about to bring bad news, or that is about to decide alongside with you which course of treatment you should undergo. But going in with a peaceful mind, with a tranquil mind, and a genuine one, it's that's the goal. That's the ultimate goal. Yeah. Because
we may get better decisions. So I think about the evolutionary development of the brain. I really like this diagram as well, because there's a couple of features here that I'm going to point to.
Right.
So from an evolutionary perspective, hopefully you can see my little arrow there. It's the brainstem area that was the first to develop. It's like withdraw from danger. And then
brain.
as the neurocircuitry get progressively more sophisticated over the millennia, then they develop what they call the limbic system, which I call the reward-seeking system. So that's emotional. It does give us motivation, but it also gives us information. And that information also happens at a social level, right? So I don't want to be ostracized from my tribe. right? So I do really worry about social connections and being part of the group and having positive relationships, because that's extremely stressful when it doesn't happen. And that's an evolutionary product. Yeah.
And just for people in audience who may not be familiar with the various hubs within our nervous system responsible for emotions, responsible for rational thought. By and large, we say the frontal lobe is responsible for, rational thought, and then you have the limbic system, what you see here, that's responsible for more the emotional part of us. Although that's actually incorrect. We have now, and we've been having evidence brought forward by scientists for many years now that actually show emotions are encoded throughout the body. And we'll talk more about that. And of course, we'll talk about
trapped there,
unconscious emotions in particular.
Well, the limbic system, though, you have an emotional memory. In fact, I'll use the example of going to the dentist as a little kid, right? So it can be really scary, and it could be painful at different spots and so on. And so you might have an emotional memory of the dental office as being a scary experience. And that actually gets encoded within the basal ganglia, which is part of the limbic system. Gabriella's point is actually it's also held within the body, the physical body as well. That basal ganglia can't communicate verbally with the thinking mind. It can only give you feelings, it can give you the emotional feelings. And so when as an adult you decide I have to go to the dentist, you can feel that those feelings of fear and so on. However, you have the rational mind to say, okay, that's probably coming up because, I had those bad experiences as a kid, but I really need to go to the dentist. It's worth the maintenance, et cetera, et cetera. And over time, you can kind of settle down the emotional experience a little bit, but there's this kind of communication between the two sides. And I just want to,
and that's primarily because our body has our back, right? Our body has our back, and it encodes situations that could bring danger, especially if they're perceived as such. So let me give you an example. There's an example for a woman who has Alzheimer's disease. She can't remember memories encoded in short memory, even, that happened at even 5 minutes ago. So she is part of an experiment. She goes to this location where the experiment is going to take place. And the experimenter decides to put a pin in his hand. And then he reaches out to this woman, Barbara, and says, "Oh, hello, Barbara. Very nice to meet you. Welcome to our lab." And he prickles her. She retracts the hand. Of course, the next moment she would have consciously forgotten this happened. She goes through the experiment, comes out of it. The experiment is right there by the door. And he's about to extend his hand. And Barbara says, who can't remember what happened even 2-3 minutes ago, she says, "Oh, no, thank you." "Why, Barbara?" And she says, "Because some people are nasty and they put pins in their hands." So this is one of the many examples that we have in science showing that unconscious emotions are there to protect us. They have our back. They have our physical body's back, right? Because we constantly communicate to it things that are desirable versus things that we want to avoid. They're painful, right? So we want the desirable, the pleasant. We don't want the avoidable, the pain, and so on. And so those emotions are there encoded throughout the body. Yes, in the central nervous system, but also throughout the body to help us avoid those situations, right? Now, what you are talking about is the conscious mind that says, okay, I have a mind. I am a decision maker. I can decide moment to moment. Yes, although I'm afraid to go to the dentist because I know what happened and I know what's going on there. I am going to go to the dentist. It's okay. I've been through the dentist procedures before. I'll be fine. I'll be okay. And you go in with a peaceful mind, you'll have a much better experience.
Right. Yeah. And that's why I really like that part of the diagram, this kind of arrows between 2 and 3, because your emotional state actually will influence how you think and what you think.
Totally.
Right. But also
appropriately so.
Appropriately so. And your thinking mind can also settle down your emotional reactions. Right. So there's this kind of playback between the two, or the thinking mind can ramp up that emotional experience. So in some sense, we want to be conscious of that process, because then we can override and try to use the higher mind, the higher conscious mind, to settle down the more immature mind, even though the immature mind is providing extremely valuable information. So it's the two together. So I gave you the example of going to the dentist. The other point is that we actually need the emotions to make decisions, which is really wild. It is not just a conscious process. Lots of different experiments where they actually use a magnetic signal, or of the lawyer, for instance, who had an operation. It cut the connection between the conscious mind, the thinking mind, and the feeling mind. And even though cognitively he could answer lots of questions and was smart, but he couldn't make a decision. They asked him the question, when do you want to come back for your appointment next week? And he could list off every single hour and the pros and cons of going at that particular hour, but he couldn't make a final decision because he didn't have that kind of gut response to say, yes, that feels right. So the emotions actually contain intelligence that's combined with the cognitive side, make the best decision. It's not just rational. Yeah. Anyways, I know Gabrielle could riff on that for another 5 minutes. So, and so the point is, we need our emotions to make good decisions, decision-making, creativities. And ultimately, we're really trying to point everyone to this idea. Go ahead.
Yeah. I think we should stop here for a second and just talk quickly about the literature that demonstrates this link between how we feel and how we perform on cognitive tasks. And I just want to give you some examples for my doctoral thesis, for example, years ago, too many years ago.
Yes.
For me to want to really admit so. One of the things that I did for my doctoral dissertation is I started to look at the mechanisms through which music and speech not only conveyed emotion such that we perceive emotion in our, you hear a song and you know if you like it or not, if it's pleasant, and you hear one, right? Or the same thing, you go to some lectures and you really like listening to somebody's voice, and you go to others and you say, gee, do I have to come here 3 times a week and listen to this? Why? Why is that? So I mapped up certain characteristics of music and speech and tried really to understand the context in which and the mechanisms for which those characteristics of music and speech convey emotions, they communicate emotions, but also they're able to induce a certain emotional state. But I didn't stop there. I went one step further, and I wanted to know if those particular contexts, those characteristics of music and speech actually have an effect on how we perform on tasks, cognitive tasks that we have to do, things like creativity. And so in one of the experiments, I induced people in a positive or negative mood state, although the story is a little more complex than that, but let's keep it that way. And because I wanted to know which one of those characteristics help improve performance on cognitive tasks. And so in one of the tasks, I put people in a room where all you had was 2 strings hanging from the ceiling.
They were far enough apart.
So that you can't hold on to them, easily with both hands. So you couldn't just grab one and then grab the other. There was a chair in the room and there was a set of pliers. And they were asked to solve the task. The task was to tie the strings together. Yeah. And so in order to solve the task, what you had to do, now this is important, was to take the set of pliers who are used for a certain functionality, right? You cut wires with pliers and so on. And you had to go beyond that functional fixedness, meaning pliers are to cut wires. Had to go beyond that and say, well, could those pliers become a pendulum? What if I, tie them to one of the ropes? I push the rope or I push the plier. So all of a sudden the rope and the plier becomes a pendulum, right? It goes in one direction. I grab quickly onto my right hand from the one rope, and then when the other one swings back, I catch it, boop, boop, I tie it, poof, done.
Creative.
So I looked at how quickly can they do this, and do they do it? And I had this was just one of the many cognitive creativity in particular tasks that I gave them. And lo and behold, participants who were induced a positive mood state, they were much faster, much better and able to solve the creativity tasks. On the other hand, those participants that were induced, a tension state, intense energy, but tension arousal, right? They were very good at performing tasks that had to do with rapid decision-making, because all of a sudden there were tension.
Focus.
So tension allows you to focus. That's why we have the so-called weapon phenomena. If somebody attacks you with a weapon, your eyes are just going to follow the weapon rather than the person attacking you. So then, after the fact, you're being asked, well, how did the person look like? And I don't know, but I can tell you what weapon they had in their hand. And so this research also shows that when you're in a tense state, or if you're really stressed out, right, sometimes stress indicates something important is at stake. And we're much better with tasks that requires rapid decision-making. For example, how quickly are you, if I put a piece of paper in front of you with many characters of various kinds, to identify all the X's or the O's on the page? That's rapid decision making. You have to do it fast and you have to do it accurately. So precision is important, and the speed at which you do it, right? So all this to say that we have so much literature to say that whether emotions are conveyed auditorily, right, or whether they are conveyed through other milieux of communication, visual, right, sensory, and so on, they affect how we think, they affect how we act, how we, the decisions the type of decisions that we make, and the level of creativity which we engage.
Well, I'm just thinking, like, put on a nice piece of music that energizes you, right, first thing in the morning. Okay, for all of you, right now, I want you to rate yourself in terms of pleasantness. So if you're super pleasant, you're a +5 to a -5. And so that's the kind of emotional content, super happy versus, just the opposite. And I also want you to rate your energy. How energized do you feel? Like super energized versus very, very, very low energy.
So let's have a look at this grid. This is called the emotion grid. And so notice, pleasantness goes from -5 to +5. So the question is, whereabouts are you from -5 to +5 in terms of pleasantness? I say I'm definitely about here.
Say 2 to 3 maybe?
2 to 3.
2, yeah.
But then,
how much energy do you have?
But then the question is, how much energy do I have from a -5 to a +5 in terms of energy? I'd say I'm about a +1.
Yeah, yesterday
I'm a little low energy.
You were higher in the yellow yesterday. Okay, so for each of you, I want you to put yourself into a quadrant. There's no
there's no right or wrong.
There's no right or wrong. Okay, so then the second question is, so you're thinking about your current emotional state. How would you describe in a word what your emotional state is? And I don't want you to say I don't want to give any clues for people right now.
Because that's just key.
So take 5 seconds and describe in a word, or maybe a 2 or 3 word phrase, how's your emotional energy?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
I feel pretty calm and at peace would be kind of the verbs that I would, or the description I'd use. And I would also be in the kind of yellow zone. And so again, so why is it that we have typically, if you do this to larger audiences, it's much harder for people to define a word that describes their emotional experience? What do you think is going on there?
Well, I think that we're not accustomed, for the most part. I mean, there are parents that raise their children and they don't be, kids, especially when they're young, they will go, and the parent will respond to that rather than saying, wait a minute, okay, Joey, I see that you're really upset right now. Use your words to tell mommy, how are you really feeling right now? So we have, for the most part, most of us have not been raised by parents that encourage us to come up with words to state how we're feeling. And that's such an important component of emotional intelligence, as Rob is going to point out in a second. Because if I have that vocabulary, I can now have much better relationships. I can come and tell you, if you're my best friend, and say my partner or someone very close to me died, and you want to, I guess you want to encourage me or you want to support me, and you say, well, Gabriella, but how did this person die? What happened? I can communicate to you, I've been through this for the past 2 months. I'm very grateful that you came all the way from Alberta to come and see me about this. I really need time to reflect, to digest, to just make sense of everything that has happened to me is not helpful or beneficial for me to go through all this distress again when I've been doing this to so many
Describing
people,
my
right?
morning phase. Yeah.
So notice how important communication of emotions is, because all of a sudden now I can confer very clear information to you as to what's happening. You will respond to that appropriately, and we have much better dialogue, much better understanding. There's less need for shame or anger or
be able to you put that within the culture. It's okay to feel whatever emotion, but it's helpful to be able to name it. And I agree with you. We haven't kind of been trained as a society. And yes, there can be complex emotions and there can be conflicting feelings and all that stuff. So then I'd ask you, if you're thinking about that emotional state that you're in, what made you feel that way? What's your reasoning for what that happened? What were the circumstances? And for the most part, go ahead.
And according to science, apparently values play a huge role into your question, what you asked. So for example, I said, I feel curious. Why? Because for me, but the purpose of my life is to learn, to grow, and so on. So yeah, I'm curious in every situation because it could teach me something about myself, help me grow, teach me something I didn't know, perhaps make me see the bigger picture, go deeper in my understanding of what's happening.
So
what's the name of the game?
For the most part, people can say, I was thinking about this particular idea and that's why I had this flare, or, this has happened to me recently, or these are the circumstances of my life. So for the most part, it's almost as though the rational mind is better able to explain the emotional experience, which is normal. And it's part of emotional intelligence as well, to be able to watch the circumstances of your life.
Core beliefs also play a huge role in how we interpret events and so on, I'm in a lineup at the grocery store, and I wanted to pay with my credit card. I've been told now that I can only pay with cash. This is just not right. And this always happens to me. That's a core belief, right? This always happens to me.
Bad things happen to me.
Bad things happen to me all the time.
Yeah. And we don't recognize that we're just, we all, like, I want to depersonalize this, that we all have our own core beliefs. And and we think they're right too. Like my beliefs are right. Yeah. So the next thing is, if you're wanting to feel better or to get into a better positive emotional state, what strategies do you use?
It's always a good idea to look back. Like the dentist example is perfect. Yes, I'm having a bodily emotional response, a visceral response. I feel it. My palms are sweating. I feel like my neck is constricted, neck, red cheeks, and so on. I know I'm at the dentist, but you know what? I've been to the dentist before. I know what's going to happen. I'm going to be just fine. So talking like a grandmother with yourself.
Yeah. So the cognitive part of it, it can be quite physical as well. So for instance, breathing technique, if you're in the angry phase, like, and it's an overwhelm of anger, this anger is not going to be helpful in the circumstance, to be able to settle yourself down through that. The cognitive, the reframing.
Absolutely.
It can be exercises. It's not just about the negative stuff. It could be that I'm kind of in a more depressed emotional state or energized state, and I'm actually going to exercise or going to listen to music to kind of pump myself up. And so that's also a strategy.
Yeah.
Right?
And our own studies in our own lab, and of course, people at Yale have conducted studies on the effects of meditations, even 10 minutes a day for 18 weeks. And you develop new neurocircuitry in the brain. We found the same results in our lab where we measured with EEG various brain waves activities. And after 18 weeks, you really start developing new neurocircuitry that help you on cue draw on this new neurocircuitry to start breathing more,
allowing your mind to relax,
really bring yourself in your gut, bring that state of peace. And there is it's such a powerful technique to have, and
lots of different strategies.
Practical tool that has such high applicability. Meditation, but definitely get into the routine, a daily habit of meditating
as well.
So
and we'll get to that as well. So just not to say these words are the right words for those 4 quadrants, but we're starting to add a little bit of language, a little bit of labeling, a little bit of distance to our emotions when we can when we watch that. So have a look at your own quadrant, for instance.
A friend of ours was telling us the other day, we're giving a similar presentation to our group in Pictou County, and a friend of ours was saying, you know, I have this app that every day it is asking me how I'm feeling, so I have to choose words. And
the app does give more words. Yeah.
And she said, I've noticed that my repertoire of how I respond to internally.
Right.
When I ask myself, what's happening right now? Why am I so flustered? I mean, the other day you were asking me, let's give such and such task to such and such person. And although I heard Rob, I said nothing, but you could tell, you could read my emotional outside expression that I was avoiding the answering. And Rob very politely, I mean, this is a perfect example of using your words, how to communicate. He said, I can see that you are not comfortable with this course of action, but it is not fair to me because you're not answering me.
Yeah,
so, right,
even if you say, I don't want to talk about this
say,
now,
well,
or let's talk about it tomorrow.
Yeah. Right away, I took a deep breath and I said, you are right. The answer, if I give this answer to you, would bring, I could damage the relationship between you and this individual. So I don't want to do that. So I'm taking my time to think, what's the best course of action? But I'm also tired. And I said, I need some time to think about this. And I promise I will come up with it. And he said, oh, I see. That's wonderful. Okay, let's talk when you're ready and so on. But he received communication, right? There's no need to assume motivation.
Right.
And just assuming people motivation is one of the worst things we can do. We do it all the time. It leads to trouble because you don't know what people are thinking, really.
Okay,
That's
so we're moving forward.
Anyways, But anyway, so wonderful.
This is, I mean, I'm just thinking about this now as adding more of the.
Oh my goodness, they're coming words.
Right, yeah. Because they say there's a primary, maybe 5 or 6 emotions, but each of them have their own granularity as well.
Right.
So,
and actually, it's funny because you're putting here a list of almost primary emotions, which are known to be universal. Again, I want to bring this up. So basic emotions, just happiness, fear, sadness, disgust. There are basic emotions, and they have been shown to be perceived universally everywhere in the world, but also be communicated and induced universally. So it's kind of interesting. It shows the common denominator, our humanity.
Well, we're all common evolution pathway. I want to just reflect on just a few of these as well. So for instance, I will feel frustrated and grumpy or annoyed. Like those are kind of my angry feelings, right? Or definitely on the impatient side, or irritable, right? Sadness. I don't feel often sad. I think I'm maybe mournful, regretful, maybe regretful. If I do something and it offends somebody, I would feel a little bit sad or regretful. Anxious, I can definitely run on that side of things. Like worried, cautious, stressed, hurt or jealous. Because we have to recognize that we humans are wired around relationship. And so the hurt/embarrassed has to do with the social norms, right? So
exactly. I was thinking actually at various times in one's life, you would pick more, for example, say hurt, sadness, embarrassed than you would at a certain age, right? So there is a cycle, a developmental cycle that I guess puts into focus some emotions more than others, but we all have experienced a plethora and all of those emotions at various times. And sometimes they're more predominant than others.
Well, another one is that they can also be very helpful. So for instance, I think about embarrassed, giving myself feedback to say, oh, I really screwed up in how I did that. I should feel embarrassed. Therefore, I learn from it, right? Or hurt or anxious. I mean, anxiety, we'll talk about that shortly, is that has its purpose for certain. Okay, so I just want to make sure we can flush that out. Okay, so what's emotional intelligence? To recognize, understand, and manage emotions. It has the 4 realms, which is being aware of our own emotional reactions. And that can be both the physical, the emotional energy, even the thoughts that can go around emotions is the awareness piece. And then with that, we can self-regulate. We can decide, is this out of whack? Is this appropriate? It's not like we want to shut down our emotions. It's just like, are these emotions serving us? Is this helpful? Is this how I want to live my life?
And I'm sorry,
Go
but I'm
ahead.
just,
Yeah.
no, you go ahead, and then at the end of this slide,
Okay.
I would provide you with a very practical tool.
Nice.
That at least my students loved it. It's always nice to put in words some practical solutions. And
Nice.
I have one as well.
Oh, good. So then
I think it's fun. It's a fun exercise.
We apply that same thing to our relationships, because being emotionally intelligent actually profoundly influences our relationships and our ability to be effective in the world, right? So, and it's looking, see what's happening from an emotional point of view, what that maybe they be thinking, what may be their motivations, right? So just to be open to kind of seeing life from their perspective. And ultimately then as well, I think this is super important. The relationship management for me starts with this sense of goodness in my heart. A kind of, I'm here to have interactions with other people so that I can serve their needs and that we can have a really positive experience together. So this has to do with motivation. This has to do with value. I value love. I value connection. I value being a facilitator to happiness in other people. So I want my emotional intelligence to serve that greater good.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about practically about this. So this is all very nice, right? Awareness, self-regulation, social awareness, relationship management. I mean, oftentimes I remember talking about those points with my students. It's overwhelming. And a lot of them will put their hands up and say, no way. Where do I even begin? And hey, I mean, you can be 80. I mean, it doesn't matter. Yes, I know about those things. You think that they come easily? No, it's a lifetime of training, and it's going to go on until I die.
Yes.
So let's talk about some practical solutions to this. After this call, and you can write some notes about this, because it's a beautiful, liberating exercise that really helps us grow, all of us. Ask yourself, how am I feeling right now? In my gut, that gut feeling that tells us, don't do that, don't go there. In my gut, am I at peace? And if you're not, I'm hoping for the purpose of this exercise, you're not, that you ask yourself, start by being curious, or put down on the notes, curious, number one.
Curious. Be curious.
What is happening to me? On a scale 0 to 10, I'm maybe about a 3 on peace. Why? What's that 3 about? And, go to the washroom, or go cook, go wherever you need to go, do your groceries, and keep in the background of your consciousness, thinking about what it is that brings me a sense that is a departure from peace. And then start thinking about that, and maybe write down some words, communicate to yourself why you might not feel completely at peace. And watch what happens, because that brings up the awareness of my emotions. The moment you become aware, the moment you start writing words and are able, therefore, to communicate that which was uncommunicated because it was unconscious. So now we need to give it words. We call it into being. I feel I'm not fully at peace because an incident happened yesterday and I did not communicate about it, and it's still eating at me. Okay, so now that's self-regulation. Okay, I could have said something, I didn't. It's really not the fault of the other person. I'm in charge of my emotions. They can't regulate my emotions. I have to regulate my emotions. Okay, so now I know. I'm writing this down. Next time, and just go on with your life. A week from now on, you might find yourself again not at peace, again curious. Gabrielle, I wonder what's happening right now. And I mean, it's such a beautiful process, because it's just me and me, nobody else. There are no witnesses to this process. This is not a badge of honor. I'm learning, I'm growing. I'm learning, I'm growing. I'm really self-loving to do this, right? And then I'm becoming aware, oh, you're really triggered by people.
Yes, seeing
There's
the pattern.
some social awkwardness there.
Yes.
You, not them, have a problem with. Okay, that's so good. I get this. All right. So, and I understand what's happening. So what are the triggers? How can I communicate now? Relationship management. How can I communicate this in simple terms, even if they're not perfect terms, this to the other person? I remember at some point in my life going through something very, very difficult. And I was really having trouble to communicate how I was feeling, because I didn't take the time to really put it down on paper. So make it clear within here what's actually happening. And I was a mess, but I was still trying. I give myself credit for that. The words weren't right. I kept apologizing for not using the right words. I kept apologizing for being inarticulated, for lacking some clarity, lacking perhaps precision, sometimes perhaps in the argumentation being a little bit irrelevant, maybe even a little bit illogical. But I was trying. There's such power. It's like all of a sudden, right? Because when I react to something and I'm just like, you press this button and there's Gabriella. You press this button and oh, there's
Different state, yeah.
Gabriella. I give you my power. I have no power to change the situation.
Right.
But when I go through this process that I described, guess what? All of a sudden, I'm taking my power back. And I'm growing and I'm becoming clear-minded and developing intellectual humility and emotional humility. And by that I mean that you can't change there are just a limited number of things you can change, and a lot of them, all of them have to do with you, with me.
It reminds me of the Viktor Frankl statement of there's a gap between the prompt and the response, and in that gap, defines our liberty and ability to I really should have. I got so busy I didn't get to the Viktor Frankl quote in here, but it was really beautiful. Okay, so I just want to recognize then we can work towards practice the habits of emotionally intelligent people, because it really kind of reflects this, right? So we talked about empathy, being able to read that other person's perspective. Like, as a physician, I'm trying to imagine what that person is going through, what is their potential emotional states, and then I'm trying to read their face, their body language, their tone, but also cognitively what's happening within their lives. So I'm really trying hard to understand that. And so I can understand the affective part. We've talked about this idea that there's mirroring. Whatever emotional state you're in, my body will actually feel that emotional state because we
minds are joined
that way.
Emotional states are joined. And again, we did so many experiments. I mean, we're both so excited about this topic. Honestly, an hour won't do it. But there are movies out there that you can watch with experiments where you get two people to just connect. So let's get to know each other.
And the more
college students,
the more dominant person actually will have an influence on the less dominant person's emotional state.
Right? So they're connected. You put them on separate ends of campus, and you electrocute one on the hand, of course, the other one feels it. So we are connected, really. Minds are joined. Emotional states are emotional. I want to call it emotional mind, because it's really there's no mind without emotion in a human being. Well, there is, but let's not go there. It's altered through some process.
So practice empathy, right? And then get the feedback. Like, how are you actually feeling? I'm seeing this is what's happening. Am I right? So you can.
Did I get this right? Did I get this right?
So you can
Let me see
practice
if I got this right. And such a great exercise too, Rob, because I come to know myself through you. I really love how you put that fourth point about social connection, because it is about that. I cannot grow and come to know myself except through you.
This is within
and emotions is the key. That's the key that opens the lock to allow that to happen.
And I love Gabriella's description of actually beginning to understand more your emotional process by identifying your emotions, writing about it, thinking about it. You kind of create an understanding, and then you can kind of practice what these strategies might be that help settle down or take a different perspective and so on. So self-awareness, curiosity, you've already used this. In fact, there's a new Q, so IQ is around intelligence, EQ is around emotional intelligence, and now they're actually discovering that there's a curiosity quotient. And it's super important because when you're in the curious phase, and you're listening to this kind of provocative talk, when you're in this curious phase, you can learn more about the world, learn more about yourself, and there's the opportunity for growth.
Growth, absolutely. Growth without curiosity, no.
Ain't gonna happen.
And reflection, it's so lovely. I mean, it's such it's probably one of the most beautiful processes that we undergo. That process of discovering ourselves, developing genuine, candid self-compassion. When we are able to do that, we have so much compassion for everybody else, because of course through this process we understand just how much more alike than we are. we're all going through
That's
this.
for certain.
So then you see somebody struggling, really expressing themselves or being really upset. Instead of jumping at them,
Right.
you start realizing, my God, they're doing the best they can.
There, but for the will
It's
of God,
like
go
me
on.
when I try to figure out and writing and I'm struggling. It's such a murky kind of process, but a beautiful butterflies emerges from that.
Yes.
Beautiful growth, beautiful awareness and compassion.
Nice.
Candid compassion.
Yeah. And even in the midst of the difficult battles of cancer, whatever's happening within your life, you can learn and grow and express your love. So I'm also trying to empower you. So we analyze what's happening. We try to learn what's happening. Belief. Now, this is interesting, kind of even if a spiritual perspective. So faith in yourself, right? That I can cope with whatever is going to happen, right? And that's actually true. I've seen this too often. People saying, I don't know if I can cope with that situation. And I see them in that situation. And somehow your spirit is able to match every single time the capacity to deal with whatever situation that you're in.
In our programs, we have topics that we choose outside of the programs that we offer, the patient empowerment programs. And one of them is on forgiveness. And then we have affirmations coupled with that, because when you affirm something, you really make it happen, right?
Nice.
Just the power of affirmation.
Yeah. And we also say from a spiritual perspective that there's some aspect of you, which is actually the greater aspect of you, that can never be hurt by any external circumstance.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like faith in life.
Yeah.
And
it's going to be okay. Somehow.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm going to be fine.
Somehow.
My family is going to be okay.
Somehow. Yeah.
Right. It's about that faith.
Yeah.
It's about
And in that perspective, we may not agree exactly with what we're saying, but it's okay too. But we're just going to
takes what works.
All I can say is that what emotionally intelligent people on average have. You still need to act, right? This is not saying, oh, I'm just going to believe everything's going to happen. No, you still need to exercise as best you can and eat a good diet and advocate for yourself within the medical system. So there's the practical stuff still requires work.
Yeah.
Know your needs and wants. And there's a difference, right? Between what my needs are and what my wants are.
Yeah.
My need is actually emotional connection, is actually the truth, right? I really, for my happiness and my peace of mind, I need to be in a good relationship with you. Right? That's a need. It's like, it's not like a want, it's a need.
Yeah.
You know, wanting to retire early is a want. Right. Yeah. So it's like,
okay.
Yeah.
So this is beautiful because you know what? You remind me of Abraham Maslow, and he had a hierarchy of emotional needs.
That's right.
Right. So at the bottom, you have the most basic ones like food, shelter, sex. Those are all basic.
Security,
and then security. And then it goes to self-affirmation, which is at the top of the pyramid. And those are needs. We all have emotional needs from the moment we're born until we die. Very normal. But to want, to desire, to want, to say, I want that. That's a very different process.
Right.
It's
secondary. I'd say it's not as important as working towards fulfilling our needs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
okay.
So that's subject to subject to debate.
Yeah. Okay. So being passionate, right, about something or someone, right? So I might be passionate about being loving towards others. I'm going to put my energy there, right? So we can all kind of choose that to put that energy in that side. Being optimistic. Now, optimistic is not just like slapping on a happy face. So it can also have a more greater maturity to it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
For instance, the optimistic perspective is I always have a choice. I can always be loving towards that next person who comes. And I don't have to agree with them or all that type of stuff. But I'm the captain of my own ship, those type of things. So being optimistic without letting the external circumstances influence it. Adaptability, right? Life changes.
See, I have to say something about it. You provoked me to say, no, you did nothing. You did nothing. But I cannot help but to say that this idea of optimism, so much literature talking about the joy that we experience, especially when you were young children, because that's when it all starts. That's with the journey of a human, at least in this particular point in time, starts. And you're joyful, and depending, you might go to school and you might be bullied, and all that gets oppressed. And so optimism happens when one chooses to be happy, no matter what. Even if I get beaten up, but the boys and the girls in the schoolyard, I want to be happy. I'm going to go home and hug my mommy, and I'm going to hug my dog, and I'm going to, again, the idea of one, because we were talking a moment about needs versus wants. So there you have it. Needs, it becomes the impetus of this process to start being triggered by a choice. I want to be happy. I want to express my joy.
Nice.
I want to hold on to that, even if it's painful, even if it's dangerous.
Right. Wow. Beautifully said. So adaptable means that we're willing to change and grow and learn, right? Different strategies. And I'd say this is super important as well, as the desire to help others and the desire to help yourself, right? So the emotionally intelligent people prioritize that as important to them, that they're there to serve others, but they can also serve themselves as well. So they're seeing a greater value. So I just thought that was super, like Gabrielle hasn't seen some of these slides. So anyways.
It's wanted to surprise me. I said,
yeah,
it won't phase me out.
Yeah, exactly. So I want to, I mean, there's a whole talk on having a cancer diagnosis and working with, for instance, the fear of recurrence or, working with anxiety, et cetera, et cetera. And so I just want to provide some kind of basic ideas as to how we can work with those emotions, because those emotions are going to come up for all of us. It's normal. It's natural.
Oh my goodness.
And it can also motivate us, right?
No matter how prepared we are.
So
right?
it might
might
motivate you to take better care of yourself, to exercise more, to eat better, to meditate, to invest in your relationships, right? So you allow that energy to focus yourself towards something that's more important. Okay, so I would say I'm very pragmatic. I want to just see the truth of the situation and then decide how I'm going to respond to it. A lot of the time I can't control a good portion of it. I want to be able to focus my energy on the thing that I can influence. That's where I'm putting my energy, so that I'm dealing with reality. I can't do that, therefore I'm going to do this. And I think that's helpful as well. And so you take practical steps. I'd also warn people that, worrying can be a habit, and it just doesn't necessarily help to try to create 25 backup plans. You may be tricking yourself into thinking that you're actually doing something, but ultimately too much worrying is not kind of helpful for your brain.
Yeah, and I have a premise that could help us all.
Go for it.
It's one that you've heard from me many times, and it's the fact that there is actually a reason why we tend to worry a lot, and that is, while growing up, for every 30 negatives in general, typically there's one positive. So notice there's a lot of reinforcement there as we grow up, right? So we just follow that pattern, which is the path of least resistance. I don't have to question it. It's just there, and I'm not curious about it. Oopsie. Now there you go. Right? Another opportunity. Write that down.
Right.
I wonder
What's
about
the
that.
pattern?
What's the pattern? So if you can use this pattern to say, I'm worrying again. Oops, there goes my unconscious mind trying to protect me. It's okay. It's okay. I don't need to be protected. I can choose to see things differently. There are many things to be grateful for. I have a beautiful home, a beautiful husband, or kids are, they're good. Everybody's good. It's okay. It's
focusing
so
there.
much to be grateful for.
Yeah.
I have a job. I can pay for my groceries. I have a car. So much to be grateful for.
Yeah.
And I have a willingness to grow and learn. That's wonderful. And I'm a generous person. That's wonderful. Lots to be grateful for.
Yeah. So you're focusing there, right? So focus on what you can control. Again, this is a much longer talk around how to actually settle down your stress reaction and ways to kind of reframe. So for instance, we can get so caught in our worries and fears that that's all we see. And even if some of them may be true, like this cancer is really influencing the quality of my life. If you're just focusing there, it's probably better just to kind of let go of some of those thoughts or just set them aside. And then be able to say, well, but I can do this, even though that thought is true, it's not helpful. Therefore, I'm just not going to keep thinking about it. Okay. Next, anger, frustration, right?
Action, reaction, in between, nothing.
Yeah, and it can motivate you. Sometimes there's injustice. Sometimes you have to speak up for yourself and set the boundaries. But we're essentially thinking about like getting too wound up. And for instance, if you kind of yell at the cab driver or yell at the rude person like unnecessarily, it just winds you up further, is actually the data around that. So again, taking practical steps. So the breathing exercise, typically we don't have to respond in that exact moment. 4 or 5 long, slow, smooth out breaths can actually settle down the physiology. Then you gain access to being able to see more clearly what's practical, what's not. So there you get the practical steps type thing. Know what to do. Name the emotion. I'm trying to do that more. It's like, I'm feeling irritated right now. Like the irritation is there. Irritation is happening. Fatigue is happening.
Yeah, it takes
Grumpiness is happening.
And we don't give enough credit to ourselves when we do that, you know? You do that very, very well. I'm just listening to you now. I'm saying, I don't, do I say it as loud as many times as you do? I think you're much better.
Yeah.
I'm just,
I just feel bad because
mentally,
because if you watch,
which has already
if you watch me, I'm like, you know, I'm kind of snarling around. I'm thinking,
good.
And the emotional intelligence is, how does Gabriella, like, what is her perception of me going like, it's so much better for me to say to her, I'm feeling tired and irritable and grumpy.
That has nothing to do with you.
Yeah, it's nothing to do with you. And so it's like, that helps our relationship.
It's incredible because although I knew that before you articulated, but here it is. Although I knew that, right? We've known each other enough to know that. It really gives me permission to be my joyful self, and then that makes you forget about being irritable.
True. There it is. So some practical ideas there. Focus on what's important again.
But and we all go through it.
Yes.
This point so clear.
We are in this together.
Just like me.
Just like me.
This is not about you versus us. Or no.
We're in this together.
Oh yeah.
Including feeling shame, right? There's lots of ways that a person with a cancer diagnosis can feel shame. It's like the societal shame. Somehow I got sick. Somehow I got a cancer diagnosis. Somehow I'm vulnerable. Somehow the sense of kind of weakness or that type of thing. And we kind of feel ashamed with that. Now I'm a burden on others. There's different ways that we can kind of feel shame. So the first thing is, it's normal, right? It's like, that's what happens to we humans when we're in these circumstances. And especially because it changes the kind of core beliefs and the expectations of what you believe was going to happen within your life, right? And so it's okay. So that's the first thing, is to allow that to be. And at the same, so we name the emotion. This is where it's coming. Watch the thoughts in the story. So it's this kind of the second arrow of, I feel shame. So the circumstances happen, the arrows got you in the chest, and then you start telling yourself the story. I'm such an idiot. I can't believe I did that. And then you're pulling out the arrow and you're stabbing yourself again. So that's the kind of the second arrow of the response and the story about, this will never work out, or I'm such an idiot, or those type of things perpetrate or permeate or propagate those difficult emotions. So we want to drop the story, come into what I would call a radical acceptance, which is, this is just where it is right now in terms of what I'm feeling emotionally. This is what I'm thinking about. This is the circumstance, and we can just start fresh. Start fresh. How can I live my values in the situation despite the difficulties I'm feeling right now?
Yeah, you see, I cannot help but reflect on this. Dealing with those various negative emotions, it's a not one versus not the others. It's a all over the board thing. The exercise that I mentioned, the sooner we engage in it, the sooner we become aware, the sooner we have a curiosity about our emotional states. What drives it? What's the impetus? What triggers it? What puts it down? The moment we start having that internal dialogue and develop self-compassion, then the sooner we're going to deal with situations such as, one of shame. My mind, you were talking about this, my mind went to a colleague who was in a position of authority, so had a lot of people under her belt. She was, imagine someone like a manager, right? And so, of course, as a manager, you have to tell people, don't do this. This is good. This is not good. You're never going to learn from this. So you constantly adjust people's behavior. You give them feedback and so on. And she gets a cancer diagnosis. and she was not prepared. She wasn't in the habit of being curious. And all of a sudden she says, well, all my life I thought I was right. And look, I'm not right about this. I got cancer. And the shame, my goodness, heavy, heavy, heavy. And we started having a conversation about this curiosity thing. And at first she got very excited about the whole process, but I guess, you know, without constant reinforcement, she dropped the technique very quickly and went to plumb into a drop of shame, basically.
A bucket of shame.
A bucket of shame. Yeah. And it's very hard to get out of it when you are not accustomed to having that internal dialogue, when you're not accustomed to having self-compassion.
Yeah.
You know, so what, we all at one point or another, you tell me, who wouldn't rather be right than happy? I know you ask people and you say, would you rather be happy or would you rather be right? Of course, I'd rather be happy.
No, because we
all want to be right. That's just the reality.
Stuck in our thoughts.
And so to beat ourselves over the head, well, you know, I spent a great deal of time. Yeah, it's part of the growing process. Yeah. Okay, grow up. Okay, we're gonna go.
We're gonna run a difficult stuff.
There you go.
And you get stuck in your own thoughts. I'm not going
to cry over spilled milk. Okay, everybody does it. Let me learn from it. Let me grow.
I just I'll just do maybe a couple more quick ones around mourning and loss. So getting a cancer diagnosis oftentimes shatters expectation of what the futures would be. And therefore there's a natural mourning period afterwards, right? It's like, I'm so disappointed that happened in that particular way, whether it's, you know, physical, financial, social, all the different ways that we can experience loss. And so I just want to humanize this as well, as this is like normal, expected. And the advice is allow yourself to go through the mourning process. And yes, you can go too deep, or you can get out of whack and you might run into depression. So, but you have to kind of watch and take care of yourself that way. But it's okay to go through the mourning, the disappointment, et cetera, et cetera. And at the same time, it's like, I've heard of some people who've had like the pity party for like 2 minutes in the morning.
Say, just put the words out of my mouth. That's exactly what I wanted to talk about.
Yeah.
We have an entire talk about this pity versus compassion, real compassion and support. Nobody wants a pity party. Nobody. I don't need your pity. But your compassion, your love, your understanding, and again, words, how important are to communicate that.
I was going to just say that sometimes it's okay to actually have that, you know, session, the pity party session first thing in the morning, like 2 minutes, 3 minutes, you cry your guts out, and then you kind of wipe your tears and say, okay, I'm going to make the best of this day today. So you're, in some sense, you are honoring the emotional process.
No, but what I'm talking about
I know.
People, you know,
big picture,
people approaching, I got a cancer diagnosis and they're, oh, poor you.
No.
Really?
No.
The importance of communicating.
We have to be able to say, no, I'm a person, actually, that's my point. Okay, so working with depression, right? A lot of people, that kind of the anxiety can flip into depression. A lot of people work with depression all the time. If need be, obviously get professional help. Take the baby steps, looking for that meaningful activity, just something that's going to take you to the next step. And I'd also just say physically, because I just have a couple of slides right now saying physically you can actually change your neurochemistry. And I loved Gabriella's story right now around just perking yourself up. So the feel better effect happens after 3 minutes of exercise. Turn on the YouTube video of some music. Perks up the feelings.
Serotonin, oxytocin. When you work out, you also touch yourself. Oxytocin is released. Not serotonin. What's the activity hormone? I just have a blank right now.
Not serotonin.
Endorphins. Endorphins.
So you can maximize that through music. You can maximize that by doing activity with others. And you can maximize that by getting out into the outside world.
Super important to exercise. We cannot emphasize this enough. Strength exercise.
Yes.
Build muscle.
So if you go for 20 minutes and if it's relatively intense, that changes your biochemistry for the day. So that's why we like to do that maybe in the morning. So again, this is antidepressant mood.
And choose your bliss, choose your form of activity that really works for you.
Yeah.
You know,
Make it fun for
yes,
you.
Find the milieu that really speaks for you.
Yeah.
I found mine.
She's a yogini now.
I'm into a hot yoga, not just any. It's the ultra red, infrared. Hot yoga. That's my bliss. It's my bliss.
And you can use the activity as a kind of symbol for your process, right?
Mm-hmm.
So strength training, I can show how strong my body is, like a good, strong, solid backbone. Or power walking, I'm taking steps in my journey. I can do this. I can take this one step at a time. I'm up to the challenge.
Yeah, because there is an internal aging clock. There's an internal, well, I would call it a chronic condition clock. And it is very much affected by the lifestyles that we choose.
Yeah.
And it is so important to take, all of us to take an active role in our care.
Yes.
The medical system will treat the disease. It's not the job of the medical system to choose my lifestyle at home and come with a whip and say,
and we're actually going to show that right now. Yeah.
Mostly pants, not too much.
So the point is that these physical activities actually have an influence on our brain function. So being sleep deprived definitely detaches your frontal lobe from your limbic system, emotional system. Exercise. We've been talking about diet, practicing a meditation technique. We won't go through all the science of that. Connecting with others. And just to say that we've put this all together into a single program.
Yes, we did.
Which we would love people to come join, the Cancer Patient Empowerment Program, right? So 6 months,
daily.
Every day, send you an email, send you a little video from us talking about these issues and what you can do that particular day.
Prescribing, describing, and demonstrated. As you can see, we're a couple. We talk about those things really just like us. You're no different than us. We're all trying to integrate better, healthy living habits in our life so that we can supplement whatever the medical system prescribes for the various conditions that we battle. Yeah, that's right.
And it's very, very, very comprehensive. There's a buddy system, a monthly video conference as well, right? Which we update the science and connect people and so on. So we'd love you to come join us, cancerpep.com. And you can also just go to our website, cancerpep.com.
Yeah, it is the only comprehensive program in the world right now that translates the science for the various aspects of living that are there, from sleep to diet to exercise to strength building to emotions and emotional regulation to social connections, intimacy and sexuality. And just knowledge about how our physical bodies work. I'm very excited. We have a monthly video conference that basically keeps you in the program if you want for the rest of your life, because we keep getting together ongoing. We've been doing those programs for the past 5-6 years now. Never skipped one. So
yeah, wonderful. So thanks to the Canadian Cancer Survivors Network. We really appreciate the opportunity. Thanks, Trevor. And we'll stop the recording and we'll take questions. So thanks, folks, for joining us.